Hey guys, it's Pete from Pete from Anxiety here. Welcome into today's episode. I appreciate y'all being here so much. Let's talk about a few things real quick. The Pete vs. Anxiety Team Anxiety Facebook group. Are you a part of it? You're not? What are you waiting for? The link's down here in the description down below, or go to Facebook and search Pete vs. Anxiety. Then look for the Team Anxiety team page and join it today. Why not? You can join and help. It'll be great. Yeah, like right now. Hurry up. Stop what you're doing. Pause this video. Go do it right now. But anyways, let's also talk about the Pete vs. Anxiety YouTube page. If you're here right now, you're probably following it most likely. If not, head on over there, subscribe, be sure to like and comment on the videos and let me know, because all that stuff really helps, guys. I really appreciate it. And help me break the stigma that mental health is talked about enough. But anyways, guys, let's get into today's episode. I'll have a great one. Thank you so much again. And as I always say, don't ask how your day is, ask how your mental health is today. Guys, welcome to another exciting episode of Pete vs. Anxiety, the mental health podcast breaking the stigma that mental health is talked about enough. My guest today is a comic telling his story of living with severe mental illness, one joke at a time. He also teaches stand-up comedy to folks with mental health illness, helps them find humor in their dark days and lost years, thus transforming lives. He's also a bestseller of the book, oh my God, that's me, the one, the only, Dave Mowry. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing great, Pete. How are you doing today?
So glad you're here, brother. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Short story, live with bipolar disorder, severe anxiety, have all my adult life, had successful businesses, things went well, doing great, fell into depression and anxiety, lost everything. Happened 3 different times. Awful. We were homeless. Family and I were homeless for 18 months. Lots of that kind of stuff. And then with the help of comedy and, essentially not getting stuck, I promised myself I'd never get stuck. So I'm not getting stuck in those dark places and those hard times. Found the comedy, took a class, learned stand-up comedy, found out I had a knack for writing jokes. I was writing jokes for other people, and then they wanted to keep going on with the group after it ended. They asked me to lead it, so I started teaching, and I've been teaching stand-up comedy to folks with a mental illness. It transformed my life. It changed everything about my life, and I've seen the same transformation happening with other people.
Well, that's awesome, though. I mean, comedy's great just in general. I mean, just the fact that you can laugh about some of the darker days that you've gone through and things like that. I mean, it says a lot. And I know a lot of comics, when they make jokes, it's usually about their own personal lives and things like that. So it's great that you can see the sense of humor to the side of it. And at the same time, you can help other individuals with mental illness as well, help get through it as well.
Yeah, I think, they like you see it with comics, and there are most comics have their own challenges, life challenges, mental health challenges, different challenges, family upbringings, all those kinds of things, trauma. And the more challenges you have in life, the more material you have for comedy, for humor. And, I got a lot of material. Fortunately, if I can just say, my wife's the hero of my story. She stayed with me, and we were homeless. We were lost. I couldn't work for 14 years. I had my dark days, my lost years, and she stuck with me. And without her, I'd be in a single room occupancy hotel in Old Town Portland, going to the soup kitchen for lunch. That's where it was at, but she stuck with me. So she's a hero of my story. I'll say that right up front.
That's awesome. Yeah, my wife's the reason I start this podcast too. So, I give her credit all the time and things like that. So I get that 100%, man. So, but that's awesome though. The comedy, like I said, I love comedy personally. It's one of the things I enjoy more than anything in life. Love listening to new comics and things like that. I'm always checking stuff out. Have you ever listened to that Kill Tony podcast one? That's an interesting one. The amateur guys go on the stage.
Yeah. It is really interesting. And, there's different kinds of comedy, and there's a method to the madness. There's like when you're writing jokes, I look at the dark days, the hard times, like there's discrimination. I see discrimination. I was discriminated against. The stigma is real. But I was driving yesterday, and I drove by a restaurant, and there was a big sign out front and said happy hour. And I think that's being discriminatory. there should also be a crappy hour for depressed people,
You
and,
know, that's true.
and bipolar people could go to both.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love it. That's great. That's so cool, though. Did any comics inspire you to get into comedy? Because I know a lot of people, it's like some people are watching people. Some people are just like, well, I just decided to try it one day, and it turned out to be my knack after that.
yeah, and who knew that it was, that I had any talent for it or could write jokes or had the mentality for it and whatnot. But the way it turned out is, if I think something is funny, other people do too. And I don't necessarily think everything's funny and all that kind of stuff. But if I find it funny, other people do too. So, that's and I see other people that inspire me. At the same time, I didn't before. I didn't have anybody I modeled after. I didn't know anything. It just came. So it's my thing. But what will happen with me is I'll when I get motivated or just laugh, I'll watch some comedy on Netflix. And comedy, it's cardinal sin. You never steal anybody's joke. You just don't. I've had it happen to me, and you just don't.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get that. And a lot of those guys in the early ages, the comedy was different. You get away with a lot more things than you can now. And
Yeah,
nowadays, there's so many different guys out there and so many people doing it, and
yeah.
it's great because everybody can enjoy it for whatever they enjoy humor wise for whatever subject they choose and things like that. So
Yeah, there's something for everybody. And when I watch a show or two, I get ideas just pop into my head for different kinds of humor, for different kinds of jokes, and then I'll just roll with it, and I'll end up writing 10 or 12 jokes at a time, and maybe one or two are keepers, but
yeah,
it'll happen. Like, I'll sit down in 15, 20 minutes, I'll come up with 10 or 12 jokes. And it's amazing how the mind works, and I see this happening with other people, with other comics. Once it starts, it just flows.
yeah.
And some of them are just dumb, some of them don't work, but there's always one or two that works. And then comedy and jokes, you probably know, it's a constant editing process.
Mm-hmm.
The crappy hour joke, it started out, I think, happy hour signs being discriminatory. There should also be an unhappy hour for depressed people. Well, unhappy hour was, but crappy hour, you lose a syllable, and it's a funnier word, and it makes it funny. But I'm always editing in my head, cutting out a word, changing a word, making it better. And I see other comics say the same thing. They can have a joke that they've been telling for years or whatever, but they always try to make it better, take out a word, change a word, add it here, an emphasis there, and make it better.
Yeah. So, Dave, my question for you though is, since you have anxiety, what's it like getting on stage in front of people? It's got to kick up because, you don't know if the joke's going to hit or miss. And I know when you're dealing with your mental health issues, a lot of times when you bomb, is it really get you, or is there kind of like something that you've kind of worked towards, or something you've had to deal with in the beginning? Obviously, it couldn't be easy right off the bat.
Yeah, it's interesting. I get asked to speak sometimes, or just throughout my life, I've had anxiety attacks and panic attacks. And
Yeah.
when it happens, I just start sweating and soak my collar. And I'm a total mess. My voice goes monotone. My vision goes blurry. With the comedy, though, it's interesting. The first time I performed, I was a bit nervous.
Yeah.
The key is I like my jokes. I think they're really funny. I know they're laugh out loud funny, and I've had enough of that feedback. So when I go on stage, I'm at peace. I'm telling my jokes. I think they're funny, and frankly, I bombed once, and that's when I went to an open mic. And if you've ever been to an open mic, the people in the audience are other comics that are waiting to go up and do their 3 minutes. So they're sitting there with their arms crossed saying, make me laugh.
Yeah.
And actually hoping you can't make them laugh because they want to do better than you do. So that and my comedy, mental health comedy doesn't. It takes, you got to talk about it before you start telling jokes, so people
Yeah.
kind of get it. That's the only time I bummed. Otherwise, get up there, just calm as can be, just do my thing. It's interesting. If it's my story and I'm being totally, completely honest about it, totally open, completely honest about it, and something about that is very calming.
Well, it's amazing though that you're so honest about it too, especially when you're on stage, man. The vulnerability of just telling people the things you've dealt with, because you don't know how people are going to react to some of that stuff, And as we know, it's a tough conversation for some people to have. People don't know how to react to certain things, or they think anxiety is just, oh, well, you just need to relax. It's okay. Yeah, I wish that's what the case was when it really happens, because it doesn't.
No, yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm sure you've heard it all. Like, oh, you're depressed. Oh, well, you need to cheer up. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Thanks for the advice. Anything else you got for me? What else you got? It's like,
Yeah,
come
yeah,
on, man. It's like,
yeah,
stop. But that's
yeah.
so cool, though, man. I've loved comedy as a kid. I think George Carlin was one of the first comics I ever caught on to, and he was great because I just love the fact that a lot of his stuff was just interesting what he came up with, because he had no fear to just say whatever he wanted to say, And especially in the 90s, everybody was saying some wild stuff. But George always kept it straight, man. He always kept telling you exactly what it is, He always had a joke. What is it? The one where he's talking about how many different people get offended by anything he's saying. He just starts listing them all off. And I'm just like, what the hell is going on? And then you had Robin Williams, and you had, God, who was it? Martin Lawrence was big too when I was younger. Guys like that. I got to see all them. I got to see Chris Tucker for a little bit when he started doing a little bit of stand-up and things like that, and it was always great to see these guys, because all these jokes they tell were just so funny, because it was so real, though, because a lot of them were talking from experience, and Martin Lawrence's one was the one I liked. He's like, fired? You could tell me I was fired yesterday, make me waste my gas. And I'm just like, oh, my God. That would always made me laugh, because it's just so funny. Because he's like, you're like, you're just gonna fire me. You might as well just tell me over the phone. I'm like, yeah, they don't do that, unfortunately, man.
Yeah, I admire, like George Carlin and Robin Williams. I mean, just the top of mind, the random, the not ramblings, but just how quick and how it just comes out, and I envy that in a sense, because I guess I do get nervous in a sense, because I can't just riff on something. I've got my jokes, I've got my set, and I can go off set and do that, but I can't do what these guys do, which is just, and I know they practice, they work at it. You look at them and they get up there and they do their thing, and you think, wow, it's all improv, and they work at it, but that's if I could just get up and ramble and have my humor come out in that regard, I'd love to do that. That would be my goal, to top off whatever comedy experience I have. But like Robin Williams, truly amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, just amazing. Carlin was awesome. I don't know if you've heard Stephen Wright. He's got his one-liners and just his view, his perspective on life. And he'd go and he'd sit down on the stage and just lean it back against the wall and just come up, these one-liners, and they were just laugh out loud funny.
Yeah, I also like Don Rickles too, because he always did the crowd work all the time and things like that. It always made me laugh, because he was just sitting there picking up people. People were laughing at it. They're just like, they're getting called out, but at the same time, Don's just taking it and running it on them, and they're just like, oh, they're all dying of laughter, And I love those kind of guys that do that. They can interact with the crowd, things like that, because it makes it a little more fun, because they're interacting with you, and you feel like you're more a part of the show too, because even though they're picking on you, it's all in good fun, And I think a lot of the guys now, like what's his name, Nate Jackson, does it really well too. Like that's a lot of what he does. So he just sits there and kind of works the crowd for a bit. He starts picking out random people in the crowd. He starts asking them random questions and things like that. And you just start sliding out this weird stuff. Him, and I can't think of this other guy I'm thinking of. He's a real skinny white dude, but he's real good at it too. He starts asking questions, and he always finds the most interesting people in the crowd. Like they tell him the wildest things ever. He's like, hold up, we got to find this out. And I think he was talking to someone's grandmother. And he was like, hey, what's the youngest guy you ever hooked up with? And she's like 40 years younger. He goes, hold on, 40 years younger. He just starts freaking out. I was like, oh, no, stop, man.
Yeah, that was yesterday, she says, because, anyway. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's
Oh,
so
yeah.
unique though. But like guys like Jim Carrey were interesting too, because when he did In Living Color, like all the stuff, all the different things going on. All the guys at Mad TV, Saturday Night Live, all those guys, man. Credits to all of them, because like you had to think of a lot of that stuff on the spot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and especially the Saturday Night Live skit. What is the one where we're all sitting there with the panel with the aliens, and they had, I can't think of what her name is exactly, but she's sitting there, and her responses to these answers are just like, you're just dying and you're in tears by the time this is over, because she's over there talking about this wild stuff. And the one guy that's conducting the interview says, "Hey, listen, all right, enough with trying to make out with the aliens. We don't need this anymore. You need to stop, goddammit, okay?" And it's like,
yeah, that's great stuff. Great stuff.
And there was always, was it In Living Color always had David Allen Greer, and you had what was the other one? The Wayans brothers. I'm trying to think.
Oh,
yeah. It had the Wayans brothers. Had the Wayans brothers. Had the Wayans sister there, and they always had some interesting comedy ones to come up with. Like the Men on Sports thing. That was the only one that's always stuck with me. The one where David Allen Greer and Tommy Davidson were like the two gay dudes talking about sports. Men on Sports. It was just so funny because they were like because David. He could scream so loud. So like you just started laughing because it was just so funny, because these two guys, they're making jokes about these things, and nobody's getting mad about it. You know what I mean? It's just like, now it's like if you start making those jokes, everybody in the world get offended by everything. It's like, come on now.
Yeah, the offense. I've got a joke, and I'll probably tell it. I've only told it once other time on a podcast, but I've got a sense that it's okay to tell it now, but I couldn't tell it before, and I'll tell it to you. Since I'm talking about it, I'll go ahead and tell it to you. It's a bit edgy, but it's funny. It's just laugh out loud funny, and there's no reason for it to be offensive. But Target had the tech friendly swimsuits that they had, and they took them and they put them in the back, but you can still buy one. But if you, in order to buy one, you have to have a concealed carry permit.
It is. That's fucking great. Oh my God. That's awesome. That's saying like people get offended these days about everything, and it's like, and it's the same thing when it comes to mental health topics too. Like certain topics just like suicide scares people, man. And I don't know why it is, Dave. It's like it's something we all deal with. You know what I mean? It's one of those things you've been through yourself. You know what I mean? But it's like when you talk about it with somebody, they start tensing up. But it's like we start making jokes about it. It's okay. It's all. But it's like when you're trying to have a real conversation, it's like you should worry, because if someone's making these jokes, it's a possibility that thought is on their mind. Yeah,
I've got a suicide joke too, and it's interesting when I'm doing my comedy. I preface it by saying it's mental health. I'm talking about myself, and not fun to anybody. I do that in kind of a fun way. But and I go everywhere. I mean, especially in the classes that I teach, we go everywhere. And I haven't had a person in any of the classes who hasn't had suicide ideation. And they have thought about ending their lives. They've thought about maybe how they'd run into a tree, or they'd jump off a bridge, and it's just, and we laugh about it. We talk about it and laugh about it. They're not going to act on it. They're not going to do it, but it's the thoughts that come into your head. But when things were, for me, things were really bad. I had my 14 lost years and dark days. And at one point I decided to end it all. So I went up into the bathroom and I took a bunch of pills. Afterwards, I called my wife for help. She said, there are more pills under the sink.
Wow. I was like, wait a minute.
Exactly.
Say, hey, let me help you with that. Come on now. Let me toss you a few more there, Yeah. I love it though. I love it though. I love it that the fact that we can make jokes about the stuff. Obviously it's a serious topic, but it's it's hard for people to talk about it though, and the fact that a lot of people in your classes have had all the same thoughts, it means that it's something that needs to be talked about more.
Exactly.
And I love how you're so open about things like that. And you know, it's great because as a man itself, you know, it makes it look better on us because we're not so scared to talk about our feelings and things. Because, you know, we're always taught, you know, to be macho men, not to talk about how we feel, not to talk about these things, you know. And I think that's great that you're teaching these guys it's okay to talk about these things, you know, and have an open dialogue about it, because I don't feel like enough people do, you know. And I think that when it comes to that, a lot of people don't know how to react to those kind of things, you know, and stuff like that, you know. And we're making jokes here and there, but you know, we understand at the end of the day, it's a serious conversation, but it's like at the same time, it's like, you know, sometimes it's easier for people to handle with humor, you know, versus actually just talking to them directly about it, because, you know, and the other thing people need to realize is someone's talking to you about it. It's better than them not saying anything at all, because the chances of something happening and them not saying something goes higher up, you know?
Yeah, one of the things I do is I run a small mental health nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 22 peer support groups that we have, and when I got there,
Awesome.
they had a few things that they couldn't talk about. So, and one of the things that they was off limits was suicide. And so if somebody brought up and wanted to talk about suicide, they'd say, "Oh no, that may trigger somebody. You can't talk about that." And I nipped that in the bud. I said, "Look, the person that brings up suicide and wants to talk about suicide, they need to talk about suicide.
Yeah.
They're having suicide ideation, and you don't shut them down. If there's somebody else in the group that gets triggered by somebody talking about suicide, that person that gets triggered, they can stand up and they can walk away, and they can walk into another room or outside. But the person that brought it up, they're the ones that need to talk about it. We can't shut it down."
Yeah.
Because, you know, we shut it down, it's in their head, they leave, and they don't come back, you know.
Yeah.
And you don't know what happens. Yeah, one of my pet peeves is people try to save us from ourselves, or, you know, we had a thing here where I got a call, and they said, "What do you think about the word crazy?" And I said, "You know, what do you mean?" And they said, "Well, you know, people are saying you shouldn't say the word crazy because it offends people."
Yeah.
And it triggers people. And I said, that is that is completely crazy. You're thinking that those of us that live with a mental health challenge, mental illness, are so weak and so vulnerable that we're going to get triggered by somebody saying the weather was crazy today, or the game last night was crazy. And you know, and the people that are coming up with this are not people with lived experience. They're the caregivers, the social workers, the whatnot, and they're trying to save us. And we don't need, you know, they think we're vulnerable, and we're not. We're strong. We're capable. And you know, we don't get triggered by the word crazy. We don't. You know, and when I do my act, when we do our shows, and I talk about the suicide joke, I've never had, well, I have only had one person that came up afterwards in all the shows that said anything. And she was a social worker, and she said, "You know, you shouldn't tell that joke because somebody might get triggered." And I said, "Who?" And she said, I don't know, but, you know, "Did you get triggered?" "No, but somebody else might get triggered." And I said, "Who?" And
Yeah,
she
but I
said,
love how she said, "I don't know," right after you asked that. You said, "Hey, but who?" "I don't know." Like, how are you going to make that statement but not have any examples of things, you know, that makes sense? You're basically telling you, "Hey, Dave, don't say this joke," but at the same time, well, I don't know who's going to get triggered by this. So you don't have an answer. You just want to say it to feel like you know, just because you're a social worker, this is something you should say. No. How about have a little more factual proof with it? Don't just say, "Hey, don't say those things," because obviously it's not the case. Because like you just said, you know, we can talk about these things, and we're big girls and big boys about this. I think that people try to baby people too much about it, you know. We try to cater everything to everybody's needs, you know. There might be somebody that might get triggered. You don't know, but you don't know what anybody's trigger really is these days. You never know, because anything can trigger people.
yeah. And you know, she's got the savior complex where
Oh
she wants
yeah,
to
yeah.
save us and protect us, and that's bullshit. and I call people out on that any whenever I can. And the suicide joke, just like I tell a joke, and I say I'm going to tell a suicide joke, and then I tell the joke, and there's like this half a beat before people start laughing. It's like, oh,
Right.
should I? And then they start laughing, and the people that laugh the hardest are the people with the mental health challenges, the people with the suicide ideation. They're the ones that laugh the most, and their family members who talked about it, they laugh. And it's like, okay, you get it out in the open, you see it in a different light. You make it so, okay, I'm not, it's not just me that has these
Yeah.
thoughts, and it can be funny, and makes a difference in people's lives.
Dave, I always wondered something about my dad. He used to make jokes about it, like that just kind of, he always make these weird jokes. And like, I always thought they're kind of crude at first, but now it made a lot of sense recently. I had a conversation with him when I was out of town this past weekend, and he had mentioned he had thoughts of his own. Like, and this man has never told me this ever. I'm not sure what it is that's caused him to talk about it. But, I thought it was very interesting he was sharing these things. Because my dad was never the type of person to share anything as kids. He was very closed off, wouldn't talk about any of his past or anything like that. But he started recently, we were talking about the podcast in general. And my brother said, yeah, he likes what he's doing. My brother works in the mental health field too. And he's actually a psychiatric nurse. He's actually in charge of a hospital out in Chicagoland area. So we were visiting, and he had mentioned in a conversation that he had thought about it once or twice already. And he said, I think he said he had attempted to, which was really shocking because my dad would never admit that to us ever. And then all of a sudden he was just talking about, knowing that this is a subject I talk about all the time and different things I talk to people about, and stuff like that. And he was just like, yeah, I thought about it. And he said, these are what these scars are from. And I always thought it was weird because he'd always make these weird jokes about it. And like, to me, it was just like, he'd laugh, I'd laugh because I didn't know what to say at it, at the time. And I didn't think anything of it, obviously, because at that time I wasn't as informed as I am now about things. But it all makes sense now because he used to make jokes and like, make these really weird jokes about things like dying and all these other things. And it's just like, it didn't make me feel uncomfortable anyway, though. It's just like, if he's laughing about it, I figure he's laughing about it, I'm going to laugh about it because it's obviously something funny, And it all makes sense now, though. Like, it makes sense that he's basically telling me without telling me at the same time. And then when he made that statement this past weekend, I was like, whoa, hold on. This just got real. Like, I was like, okay. All of a sudden, he just started sharing this. And I don't know what it caused him to do it, but I was like, wow, I've never, my dad's been kind of weird lately. I'm sorry, not weird, but he's just been kind of different. He's been a little more open about his feelings, which I think is great because ever since I started this, I feel like now he's sharing more with me because now he knows to understand more of the stuff and things that go on. And it was really interesting, though, because he'd always make those jokes. Like, he always had these, like, I always say they're fucked up jokes, but they were like, he always made jokes, but now it makes sense, though, like he's laughing about his own things that he has done before, just like you do. You're making jokes about all these different things, your past and things like that. And I never even thought about it until we started talking about it. And I was like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense now. Now, some of these jokes he was making, I'm like, wow, he said some pretty interesting things, but I mean, maybe that's what he was doing. He was just trying to make light of what he had dealt with because he had a lot of demons he was dealing with. And he found religion and he basically had admitted him to someone. He said he told somebody that they got so scared by what he had said. They're like, yeah, I'm okay. I don't want to be your mentor anymore. But I mean, it makes sense because like he was making jokes of it though. But I mean, at the same time, now it like I said, it makes a lot of sense to me now. Now that I get it. And I know that you're doing the same thing. It sounds like that's the same thing he was attempting to do. Is he's just trying to make light of the situation to deal with it himself, And I thought it was really great, honestly.
Yeah, and he's sharing his life with you the best he could. And that's how it had to happen. That's how it had to happen.
But it makes sense though now. It makes total sense now the way that he does it though.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really cool that you've been able to have that experience and understand that. The fact that he can talk to you about that says about a lot about you and about your relationship.
Yeah, we never really had a great relationship as younger, but I mean, like I said, he was always standoffish. But now, ever since I started doing this, he knows what I do, and he hears all the things that my brothers and sisters and everybody's listening saying that, oh, that doesn't sound like you anymore. I'm like, yeah, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm an adult now. This is a serious subject we're talking about. I can't go into this thing half-footed. You have to know something, or you have to be willing to learn more about it as you go, and things like that. And it makes me laugh because my sister was like, well, you sound so serious. I'm like, what do you mean it sounds so serious? Like, what are you talking about? Oh, what did I'm sorry, what she said? You sound really intelligent. I'm like, huh? How does one sound so intelligent? What do you mean? The fact that I can keep up with a lot of topics that people are really not sure I could? I'm like, I'm not stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
So, so Dave, let me ask you about your book, though. Like, what is your book exactly about?
Well, there's two books. OMG, That's Me 3 is the one about the comedy. People have taken the comedy class, and their lives and their experiences, and how finding humor in their stories and writing jokes and performing has transformed their lives. Molly's an example. She was a doctor. All she wanted to do was be a doctor. She wanted to go home to her hometown and be a local doctor, and she had to give it up because of romantic depression, her bipolar disorder. So she lost everything that meant everything to her in her life. And her mom brought her to the class and took me off the side and said, Molly needs us. She's suicidal. I know I'm going to lose her. I'm just hoping this will help. And so Molly took the class, and she started finding humor in her losses and her experiences. And one of her jokes was, when I was going to med school, little did I know that the MD was going to stand for manic depressive. And now she sees herself she doesn't see herself as a failed doctor. She sees herself as a comic, and she performs around town. And her mom said, it saved her life.
Yeah.
And she's chapter 6. And so it's a story about folks who live with mental illness and the challenges and how the comedy changed their lives. And what we've got in OMG, That's Me 3, we've got the audiobook, which is brilliant because we were able to splice in the comics doing their act live on stage.
Hey, so that's awesome.
Yeah, we had the audio of that, so if you can get the audiobook for OMG, That's Me 3. And then OMG, That's Me, the first one, I wrote a blog for bphope.com, which is mental health magazine and blog. It's one of the best blogs. Anyway, I wrote blog posts, and I told my story completely open and honest, and just went to those places. And so my post ended up being read by over 1 million people. And the most common response was essentially, OMG, that's me. You're telling my story. I don't feel so alone now.
That's awesome.
So that's where the name of the book came from. And I took the 26 best blog posts and compiled them in a book, and got some comments from the blogs, and self-published, and so far it's sold over 17,000 copies.
Hey, that's awesome, Dave. That's really awesome.
Yeah, and when you self-publish, most people self-publish, sell 50 copies to family and friends, and then it goes off into the ether. So it's interesting that it caught on, but it's if someone wants to know what it's truly like to live with a mental illness, OMG, That's Me. You'll see yourself. You realize you're not alone.
That's a powerful statement, Dave, to say that we're not alone. I think that's fantastic. That's your message, because I think that really is the case, that people need to know that they're not alone. A lot of people deal with these things and don't realize, that there's other people that deal with it too. And the fact you're so open about it, and 1 million people read the post, which is amazing, that the number one response was that I don't feel alone anymore. That's great in itself, because right there, you hit, at least as long as you hit one person, that's it, you're good to go. But you've hit all these other people that are reading this story out loud, and a lot of times that's what happens to this show too, is that people come and see this or listen to it, and then people want to come on and share their own stories. And I've heard some crazy stories being on here. Like, let's not be lying. I've had an oh shit moment here too on this show, where people just talked about it. There was a gentleman that had mentioned that he had ideation. He said the morning of the show, that before we started recording, he had almost taken his life that morning. He said that he had the gun in hand, sitting at the edge of the bed, and he was thinking about it that morning. And for him to admit this while we're live and on the air, and all these people can hear it, And the reaction of all these people was amazing to see. How many people that didn't know him asked me how he was doing. Hey, is he doing okay? And in fact, he's doing fantastic. Actually, I talked to him the other day, and he's doing really well. He seems like he's in a better mindset and everything else, and things like that. And him just talking about during the interview, you could see his demeanor changes the whole time. Like, he was real edgy at first, didn't know what was the deal. And as we got into it, he just said, hey, Pete, can I say something? And then he just went into it about how his friend had committed suicide a few months prior, and he was still dealing with it. And he was, it was really bothering him. So it's on his chest. So he mentions it. Then he leaves the topic and he comes back to the topic. And for him to do that was a powerful statement alone, because he's sharing this with all these people. And all these people are reacting, going, oh, my God, is he okay? Like, they don't even know this guy. And he's already, oh, my God, is he okay? I'm like, yeah, he's okay. I've talked to him, right? I've heard from him. I keep in touch with him all the time. And it was interesting to see people's responses because, like, they don't know him, just like none of these blog people knew you that well. They saw your story and were like, oh, my God, I'm not alone anymore. I so feel what's going on here. You're basically telling my same story. And it's so great, though, that, you shared it with all those people, man, and all the people responded to it. It's just, that's an accomplishment in its own. Even if the blog post didn't do anything else, but 1 million people saw it, and people that commented, that's where it stopped at, that's still an achievement on its own, even without all the 17,000 book sales too. You know what I'm saying? That right there is amazing. You reach 1 million people. You don't know how many of those people are just afraid to admit that they have the same problems too. But the people that were saying, hey, I don't feel alone anymore, it just had to feel great every time you saw that comment appear.
Yeah. And, people saying, I showed this to my mom, I showed this to my sister, I showed this to my daughter. And parents that are saying, I didn't realize what she was going through, or I didn't, and now I do. But that fellow with the suicide, ideation already, close attempt. I mean, he had you, and you guys found each other at that particular point. And, good chance you saved a life. So.
And it was great that he said it to me. I'm not going to lie. I panicked on the inside a little bit because I've never ran into that situation. But knowing that this is what I'm getting into is that we're going to have interesting conversations like this come up, and for him to share it while we're live, I was like, wow. And like I said, I checked in after on him just because I was like, he's a real nice guy doing great things. You always wonder how people are doing, because people have even asked me today, were like, hey, how's that guy doing? I'm like, oh, you mean Brian? Yeah, Brian's doing fantastic. I actually talked to him the other day. I seen him. He was actually live the other day, and I got a chance to talk to him for a minute. He looks like he's doing fantastic, and things like that. His whole demeanor changed ever since that show. I very well probably saved his life from just talking to me about it, because it was great. So, and we've had a lot of moments on the show where things get kind of weird. I've had a woman tell me, what was it, a couple weeks ago, she was in the middle of a gunfight when she was a kid. I was like, this story just got more interesting, David. It goes, okay. So she starts telling the story, okay? So she's like, yeah, I'm like, okay, and then she's like, yeah, my kid was involved in a gunfight too. I'm like, huh? Wait, hold up. Wait. You just said your son was involved in a shootout too? Yeah, he was involved in this too. I'm like, huh? What? I'm like, what?
Where are we going with this?
And it just kept, Dave, she just kept stacking it. I was like, what the hell is going on here? This is getting weird, And I've had moments like that where people are just like, the story just gets more interesting because the conversation just gets even thicker because they get more comfortable and they just start sharing more and more and more. And the conversation just kept adding on. I was like, oh, yeah. She's like, yeah, I had a gun pointed at me when I was like 9 years old. I'm like, what? Huh? What?
Yeah.
It doesn't amaze me anymore, though. And it's great when you get people to open up, man, because you can see a lot of the people that get real nervous at first. They're real kind of like tense. But then when we get into the conversation, like 10, 15 minutes in, usually a lot of times you can get them warmed up and they'll just just start word vomiting away about anything and everything they want to talk about, I had one girl tell me she got kidnapped as a kid, and it was just like, you're just riding this roller coaster of emotions. I think the craziest moment to recording this show was actually a Columbine shooter survivor, okay? It's audio, mind you, okay? I'm sitting in a dark room. Reason was my internet wasn't working in the living room, so I had to slide it in where my cord was. So I had to hardline this thing, okay? So in the middle of this interview, I'm sitting in a room, and all I can see is the screen. I can hear the woman's voice as she's describing this. And she's like, I'm under the table. I'm like, oh, shit, we're under the table. And it's like a mental health D&D you're playing right now, because she's describing the whole situation to her. She's like, I'm under the table. The person walks in, and I didn't realize she was that close to one of the shooters in the incident. She was sitting close enough she could see this guy's eyes, the whites of this dude's eyes, and everything else. That's how close she was. And the things she was seeing, she's describing to you, and you're like sitting there, and, you know, the room's completely dark, so all I can focus on exactly what she's saying. It's like playing, you know, mental health D&D at this point, because she's like, yeah. He looks at me, he's trying to tell me to come out. I'm like, oh God, we're not coming out. We're not coming out. No, we're not coming out. So I'm thinking in my head as she's talking to me, and I'm just like, oh God. And she's like, yeah, you know, there's somebody in front of me got shot. I'm like, oh God, really? Oh, somebody got shot? Okay. And you're visualizing this as it's going on the whole time in your head.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's amazing stuff. That's amazing.
Man, I was having a panic attack, Dave. I'm not gonna lie, I was freaking out for a minute. I was like, God, we're gonna get caught, aren't we? We're gonna get caught. You know, like you're thinking in your head, you're like that, like the proverbial black woman in the theater screaming at the screen, going, "Oh hell no, run, man! You gotta get out
of there!" Yeah.
So,
well,
but you know. No, go ahead, Dave.
You got this forum, you know, and you're talking about real stuff, and so it brings out, you know, it brings out the real stuff, and doesn't, you know, you one of the blog posts I wrote about was, you know, people with mental illness oftentimes it's like consuming, and it's what's their life, and so they'll go to an event, a party, or some kind of event, and they'll be talking to people, and they'll go up and they'll start talking about their mental illness and their breakdown and their meds and this kind of stuff, you know, and the people disappear, they escape as quickly as they can, you know. And so one of the things we worked on is you know, planning. Okay, you're going to go to this thing. Okay, I'm going to go to this thing. Okay, what are you going to wear? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, what am I going to talk about? Is there a book? Is there a movie? Is there something? And can I talk about something besides my, you know, mental health challenges?
Yeah.
And you know, pre-plan it. So, and the other thing is, you know, when you're talking to somebody, smile, ask and listen. Because if you smile and you smile in your eyes, they can see it. And then if you ask them questions, listen to what they're saying. You know, people love talking about themselves. So anyway, just, you know, it's you know, I've been there. You know, had a dark day, had a hard time, had challenges. How was your day? Well, it was bad. I did this. You know, and so they can't wait to get away.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and it's hard to find people to talk to about it that you can feel safe talking to about it without them judging you, and, you know, things like that. And that's the great thing. I'm creating a safe space here for people to come in here, and we can have these conversations, because I'm not judging anybody. I have my own problems I deal with. You know, I have anxiety and depression myself. And, you know, and there's some days that I just I don't even want to get out of bed, and it's that bad, but I'll get up to do the show, honestly, because you know, it's the highlight of my day most days is I get to meet new people every day, you know, and the new topics they bring into the conversation, you know, and things like that. And that's a great thing is when I'm looking for new guests for the show, I'm always looking for people from different aspects. And we had a gentleman yesterday, he worked with actors themselves, and Albert had a background as a PhD in psychology as well. So it was interesting to see, because we were talking about some of the other actors that we lost, like, you know, like Heath Ledger. He thinks that the Joker role is actually what pushed Heath over the edge to end up taking his life, you know. And I thought it was interesting because it's like, you know, Jim Carrey's name came up in the list too, but it was because of the things that Jim would do, you know, like all the extreme levels of things he'd go to just for the art itself, like, you know, do his own stunts and things like that, you know. And then Jackie Chan would do the same thing kind of too a little bit. And it's always crazy to hear when people start saying that, because it's just like, you know, people enjoy the outcome, but they don't think of the process that went into it. And I think it's the same thing with comics though too. A lot of these guys joke about things, but a lot of them are struggling with stuff that, you know, that a lot of people think it's funny, but at the same time they're being serious. Like, you know, like Bert Kreischer talks about his anxiety is really bad, you know, and things like that too, you know, and all these other guys have these issues and things like that, you know. And like Chris Farley, he struggled in the background, and no one even realized until you saw the documentary about all the people that knew that Chris had struggled with so much. You know, he's trying to fit in with everybody and do all these different things, you know, and you never know because Chris put on a mask. And it's the same thing with comedy. Like, you know, you've some of these guys, you end up losing them. You just don't know because they mask it so well. They don't want to talk about it, you know, and things like that. So like I said, I think it's real great though that you're bringing it to light for people. You're helping people deal with it, because I think you're making a major impact in this thing, you know, and it's great to hear, you know, that these guys are getting a chance to make jokes about it and bring it to light a little more, and it's still having a conversation either way. Think about it. You're still telling people about your story, and every time when these guys get on stage and tell their story, it's that much powerful because somebody's going to hear it. Somebody's going to say, hey, just like your blog post, hey, listen, oh yeah, I could resonate with that. That's awesome. That's me too. Now I don't feel so alone and things like that. And I'm sure that people come up to them after shows and said that, hey, listen, I appreciate it because I struggle too.
Yeah, it's very common. Somebody will come up and say, yeah, you're telling my story. That's, and I say, I tell my story one joke at a time. My story is other people's stories. That's kind of, I'm kind of an everyman, bipolar disorder, anxiety and depression, all this kind of stuff, and these experiences. And, I've had a lot of I have experiences that other people do too. So, we can relate. And with the humor, it's, and I see, some of the people you're talking about, there's a sadness with comics. Comics will sit in the green room and they'll be sad and they'll be quiet and they'll get upstage and on stage they'll get this energy and all this amazing energy going out, and then they'll come back into the green room and whatnot, and they're sad and they're depressed, and it's almost like a drug. You need the drug. You get on a stage, you perform, you get the high, and then you go back and you're coming down off the drug and you need to do it again.
Right, exactly. And it's like a rush because, you get the crowd going and you're feeling the energy from the crowd, and, they're sending you, you're getting you all that kind of stuff too, like that. Hold on, I'm looking at some. Okay, so some other notable comics, Mitch Hedberg was one of them too. He died of a drug overdose in 2005 from heroin addiction, which is interesting because, a lot of these guys, there's some other names notable in this stuff. Obviously, Richard Jennings was another one. He unfortunately struggled with some clinical depression and psychotic paranoia. Can you just imagine like being on stage and having to deal with paranoia at the same time? Like you're afraid somebody's trying to get you. Like if he was acting out in an episode and people didn't know it, they were laughing at him, Richard's probably just going, they think it's hilarious. And at the same time, Richard's struggling there.
Yeah. Yeah. And the first thing I think of when you're talking about that is what great material for comedy.
Right.
Paranoid, somebody in the audience is coming out after you, and making jokes about that. I think that's, good material for jokes for comedy.
Yeah. Oh no, I get that completely too. And as well, Brody Stevens is another one listed on here too. He unfortunately died by suicide, and they said described him as obsessed with mental wellness, yet he ultimately succumbed to his struggle. So, I mean, okay, I get what it says there, that he's obsessed with it, but maybe he was obsessed with it because he's trying to understand it himself, because a lot of people, that's what happens. They don't know, and they self-diagnose. So a lot of times that's where drugs come in. So I wonder, if some of those other guys that died from drug overdoses, that's really what it was. They were trying to dose the problems they were dealing with, unfortunately.
And it's an escape. I know during my dark days and whatnot, all I wanted was peace of mind. I had the negative thoughts. I had the negative loops just on and on and on, overwhelming anxiety and recurring panic attacks. And I just wanted peace of mind, just peace of mind. And, if it gets bad enough, maybe the way to get peace of mind is, to end your life. You can do drugs, you can do alcohol, but it doesn't go away. And you end your life is the only way. I think heaven and hell, at least for me, for a time, was here on earth. I mean, I've been through, and I don't want to get sad. I don't want to get reflected, but the darkness, and nobody knows, you're a fellow traveler, depression, what true depression is, the darkness and the depth, and you can't get out. And
the best way to describe it, Dave, is have you ever seen that movie Get Out? The one basically where the guy is like, he goes in this community and it's really interesting, weird, because everybody's like looking at him kind of funny because he's the only black dude there. And there's a little strange guy, but he's like, he knows something's weird, but he doesn't know what it is. So there's a part in the movie in the end where the guy is like getting hypnotized because all she was using is a sudden taps to do it. So he gets into this dark hole and it's completely black around you, okay? So you're sitting in a chair, it's complete blackness around you, okay? You can see your reality up above you. To me, that's how I describe it to people. It's like, that's what it's like. When I'm down, like, that's what it is. I can't get out of this chair, just like he couldn't get out of the chair, you know, and you're looking up, and you can see reality happening, but you can't do anything about it, you know? And for anybody that hasn't dealt with depression or anything like that, that is probably the best way to describe it to you. It's just what it's like, you know, and it's hard, like, you know, and then people like to say cheer up and all these other goofy shit. It's like, you're not helping the situation when you say that kind of stuff. Honestly, you're making it worse, you know. Understand when these people are dealing with these things, you know, it's rough for them and themselves. They're dealing with that, and then whatever else they're doing on top of that, especially the guys that have, you know, really severe depression and things like that. It's like, you know, you just got to understand that there's days that for them it's just hard to get out of bed. For me, it's too. Like I said, I don't tell people a lot about it, and it's only because I don't like when they're like, "Oh, well, I hope you feel better." It's like I just don't want to hear it.
I know. I hate that too. Yeah.
See, at least we agree on that much. You know what I'm saying? So, but Dave, as we get ready to start wrapping up, why don't you tell me where they can find you in case somebody wants to come take a class with you, anything like that? Do you have a website they can go to and check you out?
Yeah, no website because I'm terrible at maintaining the website. I'm awful, but Facebook, I respond to all the messages. LinkedIn, you can reach me there.
Things like I hate the internet.
I'll tell you. So Facebook and LinkedIn are the best ways, and I respond. I always respond, and if somebody just wants to talk, whatever, I'm there. It's you know. It's important. I think, you know, I've lived long enough. People with bipolar disorder tend to have shorter lifespans than other folks, you know, for a variety of reasons. But I've made it through the darkness and come out the other side. And so it's like, okay, what, you know, you know, I'm here to talk, and like with my work at the mental health nonprofit. Now that my life's open.
What's the name of your mental health nonprofit? I don't think we ever discussed that.
No, it's. I don't know if you've heard NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness.
I think I have, actually.
Yeah, largest grassroots organization in the country, and they have affiliates, and I run a NAMI affiliate in a big. I'm here in Portland. It's one of the big counties, 500,000, 600,000 people in the county, and we've got a NAMI affiliate there we serve like 1,000 people a month, and
that's awesome.
It's a place where everybody can be who they are. They can come in. And one of the things I wanted to say, you know, you were talking about folks and comics and other people. One of the hardest things for me was pretending. I'm pretending to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, somebody come up and say, "How you doing?" I'm doing well. What's going on? You know, just pretending to be okay, and then knowing that if they looked in my eyes, they'd see that I wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And pretending was just exhausting. And when I stopped pretending, it was just, you know,
exhilarating.
Just a huge relief for me.
Well, it's funny you say that, Dave, because there's the thing I ask people, and I'm sure you've already heard it. It's I ask people how their mental health is today, and the reason is because it's a great conversation starter. Now, people will look at you, and go, "What do you mean?" Well, I can tell a lot of times I can read people's emotions and things like that. You know, really good at it, and you know, you can tell. You can read people's facial, you can read their eyes like that, and always ask them that question because it always throws somebody off because they're like, "Wait, what does that mean?" Because if I ask you, "Hey, how you're doing?" you can sit there and lie all day and say, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." No, you're not. Because if I'm asking you, "Hey, how's your mental health?" it means that I know something's not right, or I have a feeling that something isn't right about whatever it is going on, you know. And I don't have to know these people. I've had people come at me and tell me numerous things. And there was a gentleman told me he lost a friend and got shot by gunfire by somebody and got caught in a situation. Didn't know the guy. I could read the emotion that something was wrong with him. And he's like, "Do you know, Pete?" He said, "You're the only person to ask me if I was doing okay." And I think, like, you know, what I end on this point is it's just like, guys, like it really boggles my mind. Why is it that nobody in this man's support system decided to ask him, "Hey, how are you doing as a person?" You know, like someone to come to you and say, "Dave, how are you doing?" And, you know, dealing with this whole situation, things like that. You know what I mean? It was that shocking to me. It was like, really? No one's asked you about that at all? And he's like, "No, man." He's like, "Nobody's asked me at all. You're the first person to ask me during this whole situation." And they know he's struggling too. And I'm like, "Dude, I can tell you're struggling. There's no question about you're struggling. You can see it." Like your whole eyes, everything you like, the whole way you're speaking about things, the sound of your voice, the whole body language you're giving off, and things like that. And to me, it just boggles my mind that, like, guys, if you notice someone's having trouble with something, don't be afraid to ask them, hey, how are you doing, or something like that, because you never know. You could right there could save them right there, because they can start telling you something about their day, and maybe that's all they needed to hear was like, hey, how are you doing as a person, and that's all he needed to hear, because he messaged me afterwards and said, oh my God, thank you so much. I'm so excited I got to meet you. And I'm so glad you asked me how he's doing. I'm doing better now, and it's like, just like Dave and I have been discussing, getting something off your chest, it may be better for them just to talk to you about it, because at least they're talking to you about it. That's the thing. Because especially when it comes to men, they're less likely to talk about these kind of things versus women who talk a little more about it. Not to say either side is not important. It's something that we need to start doing as people. It's nothing wrong with being human to someone and asking them how they're doing, regardless if you know or not, or just complimenting something about them, because you never know. That one small comment could have made their day right there. They could sit there and be like, hey, somebody likes my shirt or like my hair. It may seem like small things to you, but it's like, it doesn't cost nothing to be kind to anybody. Like I always end the show and say the same thing, And I just think it's crazy, though. But anyways, Dave, I want to thank you so much for coming, man. I enjoyed this conversation. I had great laughs. I knew you told me to bring the jokes. You brought the jokes. I appreciate it, man. I really do. It's been great to get your perspective on things. And, I'll definitely have to check out the book for sure. Because I was curious about the book, too, because I noticed it said number 3. I'm like, wait, is there another book I'm missing in between here? I was like, wait a minute, Dave. Are you playing a game with me?
Yeah. OMG. Well, we'll get into that. There's more coming, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, you've been great to talk to. I really appreciate it. We're fellow travelers,
Yes, of course.
And it's great to talk about it, be open about it. And, so people are going to see this, people are going to hear it, people are going to, and you make a difference in people's lives. And I really appreciate that.
I appreciate it, Dave. Dave, are you having any shows coming up anybody wants to know? You want to plug any shows coming up that somebody can probably come see you live? Maybe. I'm not sure what area you're in.
I'm in Portland, Oregon area. No shows scheduled right now.
Okay.
Doing a book tour,
Okay.
leaving in a couple of weeks, do a book tour through the Southwest to places where work with NAMI affiliates and going to towns that have my library or have my books in the library. So doing that, but no, but I'll give you a heads up when I got something going.
Yeah, definitely.
Where are you at?
I'm in the Dallas, Texas area.
I'll end the show with a very simple, fun joke. Do you know what the difference is between a Texas squirrel and an Oregon squirrel?
What?
The accent.
That's so great. It's probably true too. You know what I'm saying? All right, guys. I'm Deep for Anxiety. You know where to find me. I'm X all the way down to TikTok. I'm Spotify, all the way to iHeartRadio. And as always say, it costs nothing. I'm saying to be kind to somebody. One kind act you can do to save somebody's life, or hell, you can even make their day. I'm Pete for Anxiety. I'm saying, hey, don't ask how your day is. Ask how your mental health is today.